Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/heroes, villains, and sidekicks. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Episode 40, Jesse Custer, Preacher. So this week on the Heroes, Villains, and Sidekicks Show, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite characters in comics. I know I've said that almost 40 times, right? 40 shows? But no, this is one of my favorite comics. We're going to be talking about Jesse Custer, and he is a small-town preacher with a complicated past from Vertigo's awesome comic from the 80s, Preacher. And yes, to me, this is the golden age of comics, right, that are being brought to the small screen and big screen. We're seeing all sorts of TV shows out there, and I never would have thought that I would see a Preacher television show. But of course, now there's also a Preacher on AMC. Yes, the show took some liberties with the comics. I mean, you have to with pacing and things and whatnot, and some characterizations. But I've got through the first season just recently. That's why I wanted to do these shows. And I thought it was pretty good. So like the Walking Dead episodes where we sort of talk about a character on The Walking Dead and then look at it, what they're like in the comic, we'll do that a little bit in this episode, but we're pretty much going to be concentrating on his comic book origin and story, and then talk a little bit about the show, because in some aspects it is pretty different. And before we start the show, I want to remind everyone, if you want to hear about someone on the show, head over to the website, heroesvillainsandsidekicks.com, and there you can click on that big yellow box and leave a message on who you'd like to hear. You can also go over to the Facebook page and leave a message or a post. We've got quite a few over there, and I'm working on those casts. So for you guys who left those, they're going to be showing up the next couple months. And also, if you want to see some of the images and some of the pages that I'm talking about in the podcast, head over to the website, heroesvillainsandsidekicks.com. On the episodes page, for every one of these issues or these episodes, there is a post where I have all the text from the episode and photos and videos for pretty much everything. So you can go over there and see some of the pages that I'm talking about. So I wanted to start right at the beginning and talk about Jesse's parents and the first years of his life, because they really make him the man that he becomes. I mean, like most people in childhood, but boy, he did not have a normal childhood, let's just say. Jesse's parents, John Custer and Christina, they weren't married at the time they had Jesse, but it didn't matter to them. They were very much in love, and they didn't really care about that kind of stuff. John was a good dad. He loved, taking his son to see Westerns, and of course one of his favorite being John Wayne films. And I love this aspect of the book. I'm a sucker for father and son themes in anything, especially, comics. So this is a really touching relationship that they have. And you can just really see that he loves his kid. But their happiness is shattered when Christina's mother, Marie Langle? How do you say that? Langeeggle. L'Angel. Marie L'Angel, who is a just crazy wizard crow. You can see a picture over on the site, heroesvillainsandsidekicks.com. And she controls the family. And she's insanely religious and very controlling, and she sends her other kids out, Jody and TC, more about them later. They are two very interesting characters, to grab Christina and kill Jesse. Or not Jesse, I'm sorry, John. And again, these guys are pretty sick. Now they grab Christina, and when pretty much they're about to blow John's brains out, Jesse, little Jesse, because he's a young kid at this point, peeks out and calls out Daddy to him. Now, at that moment, the plan changes. They see that she has a child and a husband, and, this is sort of, now there's an addition to the lineage, and that's what they're all about. So the plans change, and the boys bring Jesse and his parents back to the family homestead run by this crazy matriarch. Now, since she is crazy religious, she makes them get married, And I guess they probably didn't have a problem with that, but it tells them that they have to stay on that plantation and abide by her sometimes very sadistic rules, or John dies. So this lasts about a year. They sort of deal with it and, stamp it down and just, grin and bear it. And after about a year, they decide to try to escape. And they don't get very far. But what happens is before they leave, John wakes Jesse up. And before they leave, John tells Jesse some things, imparts some fatherly wisdom on his son that just rip your heart out. I mean, it does it to me every time. And in rereading it, you really see how Jesse takes these words to heart, and he really lives the rest of his life by them. So I'm just going to quote these because they're just so nice. So John tells him, you got to be a good guy, Jesse. You got to be like John Wayne. You don't take no shit off fools and judge people by what's in them, not how they look. And you do the right thing. You got to be one of the good guys, son, because there's way too many of the bad. I mean, that is perfect. And, every time I read it and you see the pages and the sun's looking up at him, it just chokes me up. Especially, unfortunately, knowing what happens next. Now, like I said, they don't get far. They get about a couple miles away before they are caught. And, these people don't fool around. And, of course, what they do is they put a gun to John's head and just blow his head off right in front of Jesse. And Jesse cries, of course, at this point. But he swears at this point in his life that he's never going to cry again. He's never going to give Jody or anybody, especially Jody. This is where he, of course, develops an intense hatred for Jody for killing his father. And he decides that's it, no more. Now, life from Jesse, for Jesse from here on out, was pretty much a living hell. Of course, he gets taken back to the plantation with his mother. Now, his grandmother was, like I said, a religious sadist who made him study the Bible daily and preached to him how God was everywhere and all-powerful and watching and really putting the fear of God into him, basically. And, let's look at this one little instance. Just when, you thought things couldn't get any worse, Jesse was caught swearing by his grandmother and acting out, and he was put in timeout. And you might guess, as I've been describing her, this isn't, any regular timeout. This is the mother of all timeouts. What they do is they put him in an airtight coffin that has a hose running into it so, air can be put into it. And why air needs to be put into it is because then it is submersed to the bottom of the lake. Now, as he's being put in there, his mother tries to stop him, but she's, beat up and hauled away, he believes to be killed. And this is the last time he sees her for quite a while. Now, she and her boys, the grandmother, Jesse and or Jody and TC, but mostly the mother controls everything. They keep the boy in there for a week. Now, he comes out, just terrified, starving, filthy. He's been in a box for a week. I can't even imagine it at the bottom of the lake. But again, she doesn't even know. He doesn't know what happened to his mother, and he is, he's lost. And this happens a few other times where he is put into this coffin. And the interesting thing about what happens, and this is going to be another character we're going to see throughout the book, is one point when he's in the coffin, sort of pretty much like a sensory deprivation tank, he is visited by a companion. And this companion becomes sort of both a friend and a moral compass for him throughout his life. And it was the Duke. So it actually happened before it didn't happen while he was in the coffin, but one day when he was watching a John Wayne movie, of course, this is what he watched with his dad, and very emotional, and the Duke actually started to speak to him through the television asking if he wanted to be friends. And he actually reaches his hand, the Duke, out from the screen, and he just walks out of the TV. And from then on in, when Jesse is really up against the wall as either as a child or an adult, the Duke would show up and help Jesse through his dilemma. And I remember loving this. Jesse's dialogue with the Duke when he's feeling overwhelmed, it was just perfect. It's like he's talking to himself, he's talking to his dad, and I thought, the use of the Duke as a character was so interesting, and how Steve Dillon, the incredible artist who drew this comic, Steve Dillon, did it was like darkened face, so you never really saw what he looked like. And I just realized I did not mention that Jesse Custer, Preacher, first appeared in Preacher #1 and was written by Garth Ennis, who was just an incredible and prolific writer, and the late, great Steve Dillon. Yeah, Steve Dillon passed away just a little while back, and he was just an incredible artist for a lot of Vertigo titles and a lot of other titles. If you're not familiar with his work, check it out. Now, again, Jesse had an incredibly difficult life. But one benefit of his upbringing is he learned some skills that would help him as he moved through, really sort of the dumpster fire that his life becomes. It has some high points, but he's got a tough life. And I mentioned Jesse's uncle, Jody. He's got two. Jody is the more brutal one. He doesn't smile. He is brutal, sadistic, ruthless. TC's, looks like your normal sort of hillbilly kind of a guy. He's still a total murderer and psychopath, but he is more of almost Barney Fife meets a serial killer. He's kind of, which is scary, I guess, in itself. So, but Jody was the toughest and most brutal. And he did teach Jesse, though, how to fight, obviously because he beat him and he would make him fight back. And just, how to fix things, how to shoot, how to trap, all sorts of things. So he learned all these things from Jody. But now, after the loss of his parents and an especially disturbing event where Jody and TC kill one of Jesse's childhood friends right in front of him, Jesse, now in his late teens, decides this is enough. I can't take it. Even if they find me, at least I can get away for a little bit. And he finally escapes. Now, he then made the most of his time using what he learned from his insane uncles, all those skills. And he traveled the country, stealing and, breaking hearts. He was like a part criminal, part gigolo, and he just had a good time, and he didn't really sort of look back or think about what he was doing. Then one day, he meets a woman that would change his life. And, of course, she also becomes... I say of course a lot in these, I just realized, where I know it's of course, but you don't if you haven't read Preacher. So just know that that's what I mean when I keep saying of course, because I know it. I thought everybody knew it. But so of course, this character becomes an integral part of the comic series. Jesse meets Tulip O'Hare, and she has such a cute little name, Tulip O'Hare, but she is just as good with a gun as Jesse and just as ruthless. And that's why these two just click. And they, along with another woman, start their own business, so to speak, stealing high-end cars and selling them. Now, Jesse's happy and in love, but that all ends one day when, out of the blue, he turns the corner and there is Jody. And, Jody is not going to let this go. He's not going to let Jesse go. And he gives him an ultimatum, and he says, come with me right now. You don't say goodbye to her. You walk away, or I just walk over there and I kill her. So, what's he going to do? Jesse did what he knew he needed to do, and he leaves with Jody. He doesn't go back. He doesn't look at her. He doesn't say a word. So Tulip believes that Jesse just ditched her, and she's really crushed and really pissed at, the fact that he did this. Now, he's back with his religious, crazy grandmother. Jesse's pretty much resigned to his fate at this point. He tried to get away. He saw now that anybody that, he loves can be killed by these people because they're psychopaths. And, of course, because of his upbringing, he is now older. He becomes a preacher. It had happened sooner or later, right? He becomes a preacher. And he becomes a preacher in a town pretty much to a bunch of people he doesn't really care for. This is pretty much like the TV show as well. Again, in the TV show, they haven't gone into a lot of his backstory, but he's a preacher in this small town. And, of course, he being a preacher, he knows their secrets through confession, and he knows what hypocrites most of them are. And, no one really, he's not into it, obviously. He's not into being a preacher, and that comes through in sermons, and so they don't care. They're just there because it's Sunday. I guess they think they're supposed to be. But then one day, he's had enough, and this is a strange part in the comic, he sees the comedian Bill Hicks, and I'll put some of his stand-up, a link to some of his stand-up on the website, heroesvillainsandsidekicks.com. And Hicks just sort of tells it like it is on stage. And that inspires Jesse to do the same, to sort of stop, just going along with the story and, just telling people how it is. So one night he goes into his local bar and he's already half in the bag. And he's just, most of his congregation's there. And he just starts spouting off all kinds of, truths that he's learned through the community and or through confession about his parishioners. And they do not appreciate it at all. And, pretty much one of his customers beats Jesse unconscious with a pool cue. Now, Jesse wakes up and feels like crap because, of course, he was extremely drunk the night before, and he got the crap beat out of him with a pool cue. And he wants to make amends. He feels bad about what he did. So he decides at the next service that morning he's going to, make amends. So he gets up in front of them all, and he's about to eat crow when a screaming, this is kind of a funny page, a screaming, spirit, like almost like a head, a baby head, screaming like a comet. It's just the head and then like a tail behind it. Comes screaming and just roars through the sky, smashes through the church doors and just strikes Jesse. And of course the page is like, I'll have the page on the site. He turns all white and, the power that is released from the merging of these entities, the entity and Jesse, release so much power that the church and everyone in it is just completely obliterated. Now a word from our sponsor. For you, the listeners of the Heroes, Villains, and Sidekicks Show, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. Now, a book that I've been reading, or I keep saying reading, a book I've been listening to and really enjoying lately, especially because of his show that he's got on right now, American Gods, is Neil Gaiman's North Mythology. And you can get Norse mythology over at Audible. And it's, of course, written by Neil Gaiman. It's narrated by Neil Gaiman. He's got a great voice for narration. It's unabridged, and it's like 6.5 hours. It's just fantastic, and it's a great book. My wife was listening to it, and then she told me I needed to, and I've been listening to it on my way to work. It's fantastic. And you can too. Just go to audibletrial.com/heroes, villains, and sidekicks and sign up for your free audiobook and your free 30-day trial. And again, that's audibletrial.com, heroes, villains, and sidekicks to get your free audiobook. Now back to the show. Now, it's at that moment, this is sort of fortuitous, but the church is just blown up and everyone's dead. Except for Jesse, of course, because then this podcast would be over. And it's at that moment that a little bit earlier in the few pages back, we see Tulip again. And she has hitched a ride from a man named Cassidy. And we're going to be doing a show about him very soon, probably the next episode. And she was actually going to decided that she was going to try being a hitman, but she does not do a very good job at it. And she needs to escape, and she just, Cassidy's driving by, and she hops in this car because he offers. But they are driving, sort of talking, and she sees what looks like a mushroom cloud on the horizon. So, of course, like anyone would when you see a mushroom cloud on the horizon, she goes to investigate. And now, Now, there is going to be a Cassidy episode. I already wrote it, and again, it'll probably be after this one. So just a little spoiler for that episode is just to recap, a little recap on Cassidy. Cassidy is a pretty old vampire. He's a drunk, and he really not to be counted on when things get hard. I mean, yes, he and Jesse and Tulip become really close friends, and he'd do anything for Jesse, but you'll see in his episode that his weaknesses, being a drunk and being an addict and just being a piece of garbage. I'm sorry, but I have a big problem with him sometimes. Ruins things. So go ahead and listen to that episode next week or whenever I'm able to post it, hopefully next week, and you can hear a little bit about him. Actually, no, about 40 minutes about him. And again, this is where we get a little bit of luck, obviously, in the story, because, they just happen to be driving by when this happens, but, they have to get together somehow. The writer has to put them together somehow. And the fact that things go from like 0 to 1,000,000 in the next few issues, it's really easy to forgive and forget that little trope. So in the next few issues, what happens is things rapidly fall into place as to, what's happening. What was this flying baby head? What is going on? What is Jesse now? What was this thing? And what's happening? And really in the next, few issues, again, because most of this has happened in issue 1 that I'm talking to you about, except for the backstory stuff. They give you that later on. We don't know what's happening. We don't know what this baby head is. We don't know what's going on. Now, it all starts with Tulip finding Jesse in the rubble. Of course, she doesn't know who she's going to find. She just goes up into the rubble, into the church, to see if anyone's alive. And who sort of comes out of the rubble is Jesse. Now, remember, she is super pissed. She believes that he left her high and dry. And in the following issues, they obviously work things out. He tries to explain, and really things start moving along so quickly that there's not a whole lot of time to hold a grudge. Plus, she's still just crazy in love with him. And what I mean by things get crazy, in the following issues, just to give you a little bit, we jump between, we go from Texas to heaven, to hell, to maybe purgatory, or a middle distance between heaven and hell. We go to a lot of different places, and we meet a ton of characters everywhere. Things between angels. We learn about God. We learn about demons. We get a lot. An immortal killer. All these things happen in the next few issues. Now, what we learn is, and this is what the entity is that merged with Jesse. And we learn that this entity is something new, something all-powerful. It's actually the offspring of an angel and a demon who were in love. And this offspring has everyone in heaven just scrambling. And I mean everyone. When he was conceived, when the infant was conceived and then imprisoned, God himself fled from heaven, fearing the entity that they called Genesis. And why? Because Genesis is as powerful, if not more powerful than God. He is something new. And this all-powerful entity now is merged with a human soul. And we see angels in heaven freaking out that Genesis has escaped. I mean, we see heaven, they're looking at this big hole in this prison, and they are crazy scared about what just happened. And they actually send an angel down to wake up one of their most dangerous weapons, and that is the Saint of Killers. And he is an unstoppable and single-minded mission. I mean, if you give him a mission, that's what he's going to do. And he is a grim-looking, it's almost like the Duke, like an evil Duke, because he looks like the Duke a little bit. And at the same time this is happening, so we have all these things happening. Saint of Killers is woken up by heaven. At the same time, authorities have started to converge on the destroyed church, and things are getting really chaotic. And this all comes to a head when the Saint of Killers, the cops, and an angel shows up. And I love how they do this. This angel shows up, and it's this big glowing light, and it's like, my son, and Jesse just goes ahead and tells him, knock off the crap. And boom, he's back down looking just like a human, kind of like, a weird haircut. And what this is Jesse with the Genesis entity in him has the Word of God. So Jesse is able to just force people to do whatever they want and whatever he says. So Jesse forces the information out of the angel by just saying, tell me what's going on. And that's where we all learn it. And he has also been able to stop the sainted killers from, well, killing them all. And again, how he's doing this is this entity, he speaks the word of God. His eyes, and how we know it's happening is his eyes get red, and the lettering changes a bit, that gets red and sort of bigger, and you do it, period. And sometimes quite literally. For example, at one point, he tells someone, a cop, to go F themselves, and they do. And what happens is, it shows the sheriff in an ambulance, and I can't remember if it's the shadow of it or if you actually see it, but he's got his gun stuck up his butt pretty much to, almost as far as I can go. You do what you're told when he says it with the word of God. Again, they don't show it, but it's it's pretty funny. And now Jesse gets all this in. He gets all this in from this angel, like what a mess heaven is, and how much God just doesn't care, and he took off, and he's just abdicated. He doesn't, and he sees what a sort of a tool this angel is, and he's pissed, and he decides that he's going to make it his mission to find God and hold him accounted. And that's what the comic's really about. It's them trying to survive and get rid of different enemies, but also to find God and hold him accounted for the mistakes he's made and the fact that he is not doing his job. So after this big showdown, the gang take off on their mission, and they don't get really far. This keeps happening throughout a lot of the show, these fits and starts, which is cool. And Jody finds them again, almost by accident, and he takes Jesse, and this time also Tulip, and he uses Tulip as a bargaining chip, as a way to control Jesse. And they're taken back to the family's home, and Jody and the mother there tells Jesse that he can have one more night with her, and then she's gone, as in dead. And that's what happens. Jody shoots and kills Tulip, just right through the head. There's a lot of shooting people in the head in this book. That's something about this book too. When I say shoots her in the head, I mean they show it. This book can get very graphic in its violence with blood and gore, and boom, she's dead. Now Jesse is obviously distraught, and right in front of her again. But what he doesn't know is that when she's just sort of in this room, in her room there, this room laying there dead, God himself actually shows up and resurrects Tulip. And so God is actually in this book, and he's hiding, right? But he resurrects Tulip to ask her if she will talk Jesse into giving up the power of Genesis. So, it's sort of almost like a little bit of a blackmail. She tells him pretty much where to go, that she's not going to. But I think maybe God is hopeful maybe she will a little bit, or that it's better if she's alive. So, but he keeps her alive. Now, this is a great segment. Now, Jesse is, this is the scary thing. Jesse tried to use the word at one point, I will say the word, I mean the word of God, on Jody, and it didn't work. Which was pretty scary. But Jesse is then, when he's tied up now and Tulip is dead, he's being held by TC, who's much weaker. And he uses the word of God on TC to drop his gun, and TC does. And then Jesse beats him to death. But then he has to get past Jody. Again, for some reason, he can't use the word on. And I tell you, it actually makes him even scarier than he was before, because he just gets this little smirk when he does it, when he uses the word of God. I mean, think about it. The voice of God it's controlled angels, unstable assassins, unstoppable assassins, unstoppable assassins of the sainted killers, and vampires, because at one point he uses it on Cassidy, but not Jody. Jody just stares at him, and it's pretty creepy to know that this guy has got so I don't know, no soul, I guess. It's creepy. Well, you think, oh, then he's done. Well, here's the thing. Jody forgot a few things. He taught Jesse how to fight. And now Jesse feels he has nothing to lose since he lost Tulip. He believes Tulip is dead. And man, this is an amazingly choreographed fight. And, the other thing Jody's forgotten, is that Jesse is in his prime now. And Jody's getting older. He's still, scary and could pretty much take most people out, but he can't take out Jesse. And Jesse kills him, finally, once and for all. And nobody intervenes here. Jody stays dead. Because as you'll see through the book, a lot of people die and a lot of people come back, but not Jody. Jody stays dead. And then he looks up, and guess who he sees? Tulip alive and well. And again, this happens a lot between some of these guys, dead and then back. Now they're back on the road, and they finally have a new enemy to confront, and they're called the Grail. And these guys are a super fanatical group of religious whack jobs that believe they're the guardians of the Messiah. And what they've been doing is inbreeding someone who is supposed to have been the direct descendant of Jesus Christ. Now, as you can guess, after thousands of years of inbreeding, the man is an imbecile who makes just weird little noises and throws his feces everywhere. So the head of this group thinks, of course, that they're doing the Word of God and that this person's going to be the Messiah. But, their second in command, who is named Hair Star, Hair Star, and he realizes this is just crazy. This thing is an imbecile. It's got no power. It's not anything. But he hears about Jesse and what he can do. And he decides that he's going to sort of covertly, working behind Allfather, the guy who's in charge of the Grail, behind his back, go after Jesse and make him become the new Messiah for them. And this becomes a series-long rivalry or battle that ends in just misery and destruction for everybody. Now, in fact, where Cassidy is at this point, he's been gone. The Grail has actually kidnapped Cassidy, and they know what he is, and they've just been sort of shooting pieces of him away. And here's the thing with Cassidy. He can take a lot of punishment. And so before Jesse and Tulip had gotten taken, they had captured Cassidy. And Jesse, of course, is determined to get him back, and he infiltrates the Grail compound, and his rescue, he succeeds in rescuing him. But they're escaping on a plane they stole, and the plane is, it's not in good shape, and Jesse is actually hanging out of the plane with Cassidy holding him. It's like the classic, he's holding onto the plane, he's holding on his wrists, but it's daylight. And of course, Cassidy is a vampire, and his arm is burning, and his face is starting to burn. And not wanting his friend to get hurt or to die, Jesse does what he is. He's a good guy. Jesse uses the word to make Cassidy drop him. He just says, "Let me go," or "Drop me." And I can't remember exactly. And he drops him. The plane crashes, and Cassidy is still alive again. He can take a lot of punishment, but he's in very, very rough shape. But like all things, like I mentioned in this comic, Jesse is not dead. He just sort of he wakes up lying on his back in the desert in great shape, but missing an eye. And he has no memory of what happened. Now, we find out later, and so does he, because he has no memory of what happened. And what we learn, and what he learns at one point in the comic, is that God saved him to show him how much he loved him, and to ask him to stop looking for him and to give up Genesis. So he tried, blackmailing Tulip and using Tulip. Now he's going to go right to Jesse, like, "Look, you were going to die. I saved you. Just, stop looking for me. Get rid of Genesis. Leave me alone." And he says a few things to God that God doesn't like. And God freaks out and attacks him and bites his eye out, which is very weird. It's a very strange few pages. But this is another interesting thing. The attack, I mean, he might have killed Jesse right there. Who knows? Actually, I doubt he could have with the word in him. And before Jesse can even think to use the word, God hears the Saint of Killers approaching and takes off in a hurry. Now, although he is missing an eye, Jesse's alive, and he also realizes something that he's going to use later on. And another little interesting tidbit of information, that God himself is afraid of the Saint of Killers. And believe me, now that we've been, I did this episode, I've written the Cassidy episode, I'm definitely thinking I'm going to have to do a Saint of Killers episode, because each of these characters had specials, these sort of ancillary characters. So there's plenty of material to go over about who the Saint of Killers is. So maybe I'll do that one after the Cassidy one. Yeah. So Jesse is alive. He makes a little makeshift eye patch, and he wanders into a small town where he becomes the sheriff. And now we've got this, this iconic sort of cool look of preacher with this eye patch. And, while all this is happening, Tulip and Cassidy are mourning for Jesse. Of course, they believe that he is dead. And Cassidy has always had a thing for Tulip. He's kind of feels he's in love with her. And now he has this in with her. He and her are both grieving. He's an alcoholic and a drug addict or drug abuser. She's had problems with alcohol, and he sort of encourages and keeps her drugged up and boozed up, using her. You would want your friend to get out. Let's get out and let's get some air and let's live and let's see what happened. But he sort of keeps her in grimy hotel rooms, drunk, so he can pretty much, make her maybe love him. It's pretty gross. They're having sex. He's keeping her drunk and drugged, and he knows what he's doing. And he knows what he's doing. And, he's just using his grief. It's just one of those instances where you really see what kind of manipulative piece of garbage that he is. And, after almost 100 years, maybe that would happen to you. I mean, I don't know, but it's not good. It's not good. And Tulip finally, though, gets free. She gets a moment of clarity, and she gets out of there. And she realizes what he's doing, and she just can't take it anymore, and she get out. And now when the two are reunited, him and Jesse, things do not go well. But again, we'll be doing another podcast on that. And at one point, again, this is about 80 issues, I can't remember, so we're sort of jumping around. Now, at one point, though, the trio, again, are united. Jesse and Cassidy, of course, have quite the strained relationship at this point. Tulip has told him that while he was drunk, or while he was thought dead, what he did to her, how he kept her drunk and drugged up, and, she doesn't love him, and she quite despises him. So they're going to go ahead and make this final push against the Grail. And we've got all kinds of things going on. We have dissension within the Grail. There's this really great character. I didn't know if I was going to put him in this cast, but there's this amazing character that whenever I think of Preacher, I actually think of him almost first, because how horrible this is. At one point, there's this affable guy who works there with Herr Starr, and they're fighting at one point, the Grail, and Jesse is very angry. And he tells this guy to count every grain of sand on the beach. Now, it's not a huge beach, but it's a beach. And the guy just gets on his hands and knees and starts counting. And that's like, I should have looked this up, but that's early. That's like, I don't know, maybe issue in the 20s. And then at the end of the book, and he was a heavyset guy. And then at the end of the book, we see him, they sort of just go to him in the comic, and he is, just thin. He has a beard. He looks half crazed. He's got these little barriers built up, and he finally counts, and I can't even remember the number. I should have looked it up. But again, I didn't know I was going to put it in here. But it's a crazy high number in the millions. He has been there for years, counting every grain of sand. It was a horrible thought. But he's there, and he is not with the mission anymore. He's sort of found his own kind of peace. And just so you know, it's a really nice thing at one point when Jesse meets up with him during this battle, he learns what he did and what a punishment that was. And he actually tells him to forget, using the word. And he looks much happier. And I was glad that they did that, because that was just a horrible thing to do. But let's get to the battle. So they're going to make their final push against the Grail. The Grail is going to be doing the same thing. They know that Jesse and Tulip and Cassidy are at this area. But Jesse and Cassidy, they are fighting because of this whole thing with Tulip. And they are outside this Grail stronghold, and they are just beating the crap out of each other. Now, the cool thing is that, yes, Cassidy is a vampire and he's very strong, but he doesn't know how to fight. And he's also not feeling he wants to, just because he knows he's wrong. That's the thing. He's that kind of alcoholic and drug user that knows what he is and feels remorse about it, but, is too weak to sort of stand up and do something about it. But this is kind of where he does. He doesn't fight back. And Jesse beats the heck out of him. And I think he would have beat the heck out of him anyway, just because he knows how to fight. And Cassidy really doesn't. So at the end, though, Cassidy does finally, swat Jesse away. And through this whole thing, they've been talking, and Cassidy finally, he realizes that, wow, he probably can't be all that bad, Cassidy. If somebody like Jesse at one point liked him, thought of him as a friend. And it's becoming daylight, and Cassidy just sort of says he's sorry, puts his arms out, and the sun takes him away. He just explodes. At that moment, Jesse is actually killed. He's shot in the head by a Grail sniper. It's very unceremonious, but he just gets shot in the head by a Grail sniper. Now, these people are dead, right? Tulip, again, is mourning. There's a lot of mourning in this book. Is the loss of Jesse until, of course, she sees, wait for it, surprise, he's still alive. This happens again in this book. But it's still neat, because when you learn why, you're like, oh, okay, that's cool. And this is what happened. Then we sort of flash back, and we see that Cassidy actually made a deal with God, saying that he could convince Jesse to get rid of Genesis. He could do it. So everyone sort of didn't take this deal, but he goes right to God and says, listen, I can talk him out of it. Two things, though. No matter what happens, Jesse lives. And then he throws in, and so do I. And that was interesting. That was really cool, because he worked that sort of in for himself. And he made sure that no matter what happened, Jesse was going to live. So even though his plans don't go exactly the way they were supposed to, God keeps up his end, and Jesse lives. And in the end, they're quite happy again. The Grail is destroyed. Herr Starr's been killed. All these things clean and neat. And the end is really nice, because, Tulip sort of asks him, well, what are we going to do now? What do you want to do? And he said, I would have thought that would have been something you would have known. And they're on a horse, and they literally ride off, because they're in the desert, into the sunset. And, you're just, of course, he wants to be a cowboy. I mean, the Duke, he dresses like a cowboy pretty much, like a preacher cowboy. And they ride this horse off into the sunset. It was so perfect. And I remember just loving it. So like I mentioned, AMC has a preacher show out, and the second season should be starting up pretty soon. And the first season is over on Hulu, and I totally recommend watching it. It is really, really good. Now, they haven't gotten into Jesse's life or backstory all that much, a little bit here and there. I'm assuming the second season might start touching on that. But the Preacher TV show, I have to say, is very much like the comic personality-wise. Jesse is very much sort of like the Jesse in the comic. Again, we haven't got a lot of background. I'm sure they've got to add that stuff. I'm dying to see who they'll cast as Jody. And one of the things, though, that was different about the show that I really loved is how they introduced Genesis, the little baby head. In the show, he didn't just merge with Jesse first. He tried a few other spiritual leaders on the planet with very bad results, meaning they exploded. So, for example, one of my favorite parts of the show, I just remember laughing so hard, is there's a scene happening, just a regular scene and there's a TV on sort of in the background. And of course we're meant to hear it and we sort of see it there. And the news announcer comes in and says, breaking story, that during a speaking engagement of a Scientology event, Tom Cruise exploded. So they even, it was trying all sorts of different religious people, and it went into Tom Cruise and he exploded. So I'm looking forward to see what they're going to tell us about Preacher here. Cassidy, the guy that got playing Cassidy is fantastic. He was in the UK show Misfits and Tulip. It's just a really interesting show. And in talking about the show and in rereading a lot of my trades, I think I'm just going to go through the next bunch of shows, and we're going to do a show on Cassidy next. Then we'll do a show on Tulip. Next will be Saint of Killers. Who else are we going to do? We'll do Arseface. If you're wondering who that is, you'll have to wait for that show. It's pretty funny. I think that might be it. There might be a few. Then I might do one where it's just 2 or 3 little ancillary characters like Jody and TC and sort of group them all together. So let's just go ahead and do a big Preacher push. So again, great show, amazing comic. You can get them all in trades. Should definitely go and check that out because it's a book that's got a lot of violence, but a lot of heart. So I want to thank you for listening to this week's episode. And again, if there is a character you want to hear about, head over to either our Facebook page or you can go over to the site, heroesvillainsandsidekicks.com, where you can click on that big yellow box next to the show and leave a voice message. And then I'll go ahead and I will put that voice message in the show and you can hear your voice on the podcast. Won't that be fun? We did it back for a Wild Dog episode, and I'm really excited to use this technology. I don't know if you guys don't want to have your voice on the show, but I'm probably going to try using it for a little bit more. If no one uses it, I'm just going to stop using it, take it off the site, and use that real estate for something else. So let me know if you want to use it. Let me know if it's has any value. So again, if I don't have some people using it in the next few episodes, I'm just going to take it out of there. So get over there and use it if you were thinking, oh, should I do it? Wait. Don't wait anymore. One other thing I don't want you to wait on, if you can, is to head over to iTunes and leave a quick review. We've gotten a few other ones in the past month, and I really appreciate that. But if you can get over there and leave some reviews, that would be fantastic. It helps us move up the rankings, and then other people can more easily find the podcast. And that's great. That's great. So again, head over and leave a review, leave a message, or head over on Facebook. We've gotten quite a few over there lately, and I'm working on those shows. For you guys who left those, I am working on those. And this was a real fun one, and we're going to be doing some other ones from Preacher in the coming weeks. Again, I'm Kevin Volo. This is the Heroes, Villains, and Sidekicks Show. We'll be back next week with more. Take care.